Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Front Page, only on the AIM Network, India's definitive media organization and voice on everything AI and technology. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. And of course, on Front Page, we have the fact that India's orange economy is on the horizon. Jensen Huang has claimed that AGI is here, or at least the definition is. And then, of course, a huge investment in Uttar Pradesh, which happens to be in maybe a paper tiger, which is ready to roar, or maybe not. This and a lot more on Front Page. Here are the headlines. Anthropic's Claude moves beyond chat, now capable of navigating desktops and clicking icons like a human. While revolutionary for automation, experts warn of security risks as AI gets the keys. India partners with Google to train 15,000 youth in AI storytelling, pivoting from IT services to a creator-led orange economy. The initiative aims to make India a global AI-native content powerhouse. Leaked documents label Microsoft a strategic risk to OpenAI, signaling a fracture in their $13 billion alliance. As OpenAI seeks independence, legal battles loom over multi-billion-dollar deals with rival Amazon. NVIDIA's Jensen Huang declares AGI has arrived, redefining it as a machine hitting a billion-dollar valuation. While critiques argue over true reasoning, Huang claims victory through pure mathematical scale. Amazon targets a massive 3 gigawatt capacity in India, backed by a 21-year tax holiday. This $35 billion bet aims to turn India into the infrastructure foundation for global AI computing. Uttar Pradesh's massive 25,000 crore AI pact faces backlash as partner Puch AI is just a year old. Government officials now clarify the MOU is non-binding amid intense public and political scrutiny. From people to platforms, NeoWay's Praveen Bhadada maps the high-stakes shift as GCCs and AI agents threaten the traditional foundations of global IT delivery. OpenAI offers private equity firms 17.5% guaranteed returns and early model access, intensifying its enterprise battle with Anthropic as both race to secure clients, scale adoption, and position for potential IPOs. This discussion is going to happen between myself and Supreet Kondinia. For a while now, this is how most people have been using these tools. You ask a question, it gives you an answer. You take that answer, move it where you need it, and do the rest for yourself. That familiar rhythm is beginning to change. Anthropic has rolled out something called computer use. And this is not the sort of update you scroll past. Put simply, Claude is no longer staying inside the chat box. It can move the mouse, it can click through tasks, and it can begin using a computer in ways that look a lot more like how we do it for ourselves. How does it work? It's pure inception logic. Claude takes a screenshot of your desktop, it analyzes the pixels, decides the next move, and then it moves your cursor. So it's a loop which follows this method: see, decide, act, repeat. It fills out your forms, it works its way through complicated menus. It browses the web in the same way an actual person would. No APIs, no hidden shortcuts in the background, just direct visual interaction. You can think of it as a digital stand-in that keeps going without getting tired. Interestingly, there is a new target in the crosshairs, OpenClaw. The open source community built a lobster with feelings, a persistent agent that lives in your Discord and Telegram. It was like a free-for-all, fast, loose, and unfiltered. Anthropic saw this traction. They saw the OpenClaw bros winning the argument. So they launched Claude Code channels. It's a direct move into the heart of the race. They're going after the crown in persistent agents. What they want is the strength of OpenClaw backed by the polish, muscle, and confidence of a trillion-dollar company. And that gives this story a bigger edge. Because the stakes here are getting bigger by the day. This is a heavyweight corporate push to take back ground from the open source insurgency. The Wall Street Journal says this is the AI agent race. Every big tech titan wants to be the one holding the keys to your operating system. The point of discussion? AI will do your work while you sleep. The reality? Slightly different. It's currently a research preview. It's in beta and mostly living on Mac OS right now. It's like that high-end trailer for a game that hasn't finished its rendering. The trillion-dollar dream is being sold to us in 30-second clips. Business Insider is already pointing to the risks, and they are, of course, not very hard to see. The moment you give an experimental system permission to move through your private machine, the margin for error becomes very real. A mistaken click, a misunderstood instruction, and suddenly your so-called digital worker has sent the wrong draft, opened the wrong file, or for that matter, done something you never meant it to do. So in a race like this, trust may matter even more than raw capability, because the one that wins people over will likely be the one that can work reliably without breaking something important. And here, of course, is the front page take. And that, of course, brings us to the part that matters most to the person actually sitting at the screen. So if you're spending your day buried in Excel sheets, routine, admin, or repetitive digital tasks, tools like this could start taking a real load off. That is exactly why this feels so significant. Because Claude is moving beyond being something you simply ask for help. It is actually beginning to look more like a digital worker that can carry out parts of the job alongside of you. That is exciting. It is also a little unsettling, and that is why this story matters. The real question is no longer just whether Claude can use your computer. It is what your work starts to look like once more of those routine tasks no longer need you in the same way. Please do let us know in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. The era of India, when it was considered as just the world's back office, is officially over. The center just hit the accelerator on a massive national AI skilling initiative in partnership with Google and YouTube. This training program is the foundation of what the government calls the orange economy. We are, of course, referring to a total pivot from traditional IT services to a high-octane, AI-powered storytelling economy. It seems justified because India is moving from writing code for others to creating global culture using artificial intelligence. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav unveiled a strategy which entails a triple threat, covering skills, creation, and distribution. The real story is how this initiates a full-stack ecosystem for the next generation of digital champions. But one wonders as to how does one actually train an entire nation for the future? The plan is to train 15,000 youth completely free of cost. And this isn't a theoretical thought. Phase 1 hits the foundations like prompting and generative AI, while Phase 2 dives into hands-on storytelling using heavy hitters like Gemini and VO. With this, they are trying to accomplish a method of teaching people to scale content at a level we've never seen before. And interestingly, the government is launching its own creator platform called My Waves, which is, of course, a huge indication that India wants to build creators who are AI native from the very first day, leading to an upgradation of the hardware layer with built-in satellite tuners for TVs. Clearly underlining the fact that no more expensive set-top boxes and wider access to AI-driven content for every single household. And this goes on to bridge the gap between the internet-first elite and the rest of the country. But of course, before we move on, are you noticing a pattern starting to emerge? The government is training the creators, giving them a platform to host on, and then, of course, building the pipelines to deliver that content to millions. For so long, India dominated the back end, but in the AI era, the pot of gold is in content, culture, and scaled intelligence. And the answer to that very shift is the orange economy, where AI doesn't just automate your job, it actually amplifies your creativity. But then that brings me to a question worth asking. Are we building true AI pioneers or just a workforce for global tech giants? So while we scale the talent, the underlying models like Vertex AI and Gemini are still owned by big tech in Silicon Valley. And here, of course, is the front page take. The real power in the new world won't just belong to those who use AI, but to those who own the platforms and shape the narratives. India is making a massive bet to become the world's creator powerhouse, fueled by AI-first talent. This is, of course, a bold move into a future where creativity is the ultimate currency. And the real question is, what happens next? Please do let us know in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. Elon Musk might have been right all along. Months ago, he claimed OpenAI would eat Microsoft alive. And at the time, it sounded like just another, Musk tweet. Today, it is starting to look like a definitive warning for the entire tech industry. A leaked OpenAI pre-IPO investor document has surfaced with a single line that changes the entire landscape. Microsoft is now officially listed as a risk to OpenAI's business. Not merely a partner or an ally, but a direct threat to their long-term stability. Quite a bold development considering Microsoft has pumped $13 billion into this company. The real story, of course, is that the most successful alliance in AI history is entering a complicated breakup phase. OpenAI is suggesting to the investors that if Microsoft pulls back their entire business, the entire model could collapse. This relationship is no longer a stable foundation, but a source of intense strategic tension. But here is something to ponder about. The cracks have been building behind the scenes for quite some time now. OpenAI is only now signing multi-billion-dollar deals outside of the Azure ecosystem to find breathing room. They are routing workloads through competitors and expanding their compute footprint to reduce dependency. At the same time, Microsoft is hedging its bets by hiring top-tier AI talent and building internal models. Satya Nadella reportedly said, if OpenAI disappeared tomorrow, Microsoft already has everything they need to survive. Now, of course, this is important because the tension has officially escalated from Cold War to potential legal war. Microsoft is now reportedly considering suing OpenAI over a massive new deal with Amazon. The dispute centers on OpenAI's Frontier platform, which is a multi-agent system for enterprise workflows. Having said that, under their current contract, OpenAI APIs are supposed to run exclusively on Microsoft's Azure. But here is where it gets interesting. Frontier is being pushed through Amazon Web Services instead. Microsoft's internal message is crystal clear. They know the contract and they will sue if it is broken. This, I believe, is a high-stakes battle for control over the three pillars of power. And here are those pillars: compute, models, and distribution. Microsoft owns the compute and the enterprise reach, while OpenAI owns the leading models and the developers. But here is an interruption of the pattern for you. Both companies now desperately want total independence. OpenAI's biggest strength is also its greatest weakness because it runs on infrastructure it does not own. From Azure servers to TSMC chips and NVIDIA GPUs, OpenAI is not vertically integrated like its rivals. As they head toward an IPO, this extreme dependency is becoming a massive red flag for Wall Street. The answer to why this is happening now is quite simple. Both partners have grown powerful enough to compete. Initially, it was a perfect match where Microsoft gained relevance and OpenAI gained capital. But in the new AI playbook, no one wants to depend on anyone else for their core survival. Let's just step back and we will all see that this is way bigger than just two companies. It is about who controls the AI stack. So when one company holds the intelligence and another holds the rails, conflict becomes inevitable. And here it is, the front page take. What started as the most important partnership in tech is now a battle over contracts and control. Elon called it early, and now we are watching a $13 billion friendship fall apart in real time. The real question, though, is who survives when the infrastructure and the intelligence finally split? Please do let us know what you think about this in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, yes, think AI, think AIM. Imagine waking up to find out the finish line for human-level intelligence was already crossed. Wow, While Elon Musk and Sam Altman are debating if AGI is 2 years or 5 years away, Jensen Huang has fired a cannonball. The man powering the entire AI revolution says AGI isn't coming because it's already here. But here is, of course, something to think about before you start looking for your new robot overlord. Jensen Huang is not using the definition of AGI that we have been dictated for years. Most experts describe AGI as a machine that can reason, think, and operate across any human task. This, of course, refers to AI building institutions, managing complex teams, and making high-level executive decisions. But Jensen just shifted the goalposts in a way that changes the entire conversation. On the Lex Friedman podcast, Huang was asked a pointed question about AI building a billion-dollar company. His response was immediate and confident. "I think it's now," end quote. But you know what? His version of success is purely mathematical. He envisions an AI agent building a simple viral application that hits a few billion users at 50 cents each. A billion-dollar outcome achieved by a machine in a vacuum. But the real story is that this AGI has a massive expiration date. Huang admits that while an AI can hit a billion-dollar milestone, it currently cannot sustain it. This AI-built entity creates a flash in the pan, monetizes quickly, and then, unfortunately, dies. He even confessed that the odds of 100,000 AI agents building a company like NVIDIA are exactly 0%. And this is crucial because it exposes a massive rift in the tech world. Google, DeepSeek, and OpenAI are still chasing the God model that can reason like a brilliant scientist. Demis Hassabis from Google DeepMind puts the timeline at, well, about 5 to 8 years. Elon Musk is betting on a much tighter 2-year window for full capability. But by lowering the bar to a single financial metric, Jensen Huang has declared victory, and that too early. You, of course, have to wonder if this is about technology or narrative control. Clearly it is, I guess. In a market where billions of dollars are pivoting on every research paper, definitions are everything. So if you can define AGI as hitting a number, then the era of AGI has officially begun. But if AGI means building civilizations and enduring institutions, we aren't even close. This conveys the fact that loud and clear that the future no longer will celebrate the one who builds the fastest chip or, for that matter, the largest LLM. Instead, it might be ironically applauding the one who decides what intelligent actually means. Strangely, a new phase is dawning where AI is no longer just about raw capability. Instead, it is about the stories we tell investors and the benchmarks we choose to respect. And here it is, the front page take. So while the AGI of our dreams, or how actually it had been defined, the one that reasons and builds for the long term, remains an illusion, on the other hand, the version that can scale and monetize at lightning speed might be resting comfortably on your desktop as we speak. But the real question is, do we accept this new definition, or are we just settling for less? Please do let us know in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. So let's imagine a world where India doesn't just write the code, but actually owns the mechanism running global AI. That might just be happening right now because Amazon is turning India into its primary AI powerhouse. The scale of this move is absolutely staggering for the global tech landscape. AWS is officially targeting a massive 2 to 3 gigawatts of data center capacity within India. Please let me put that in perspective for all of you watching. The entire country currently sits at about 1.4 gigawatts. And here is a very interesting number and fact, that by the year 2030, India is expected to hit a total of 10 gigawatts of power for technology needs alone. Amazon alone wants to control nearly 30% of that entire national infrastructure. The answer to that is a mammoth $7 billion commitment, specifically for Hyderabad. This is, of course, just one piece of a much larger $35 billion bet on India's digital future. And here is the part which makes this deal very unique. Amazon has secured a 20-year tax holiday to accelerate these massive returns. This dramatically reduces their operational costs compared to building in almost any other region. And I, of course, would now like to focus the lens on what that means for the competition. So globally, AWS holds a 29% market share in the cloud race. They are currently staring down Microsoft, which is at 20%, and Google at 13%. By locking in India early, Amazon is trying to make its lead mathematically impossible to beat. Now, of course, this is significant because it marks the end of India simply being a software exporter. We are witnessing the birth of the foundation for global AI infrastructure right on Indian soil. Everything is converging here, from high-end GPUs to massive sovereign AI stacks. But let us not forget about the massive hurdles standing in the way. Scaling to 3 gigawatts requires an unbelievable amount of electricity and water. The real story is the potential for water stress and massive regulatory challenges. Any delay in building these centers can break billion-dollar AI models waiting for compute. But Amazon believes the reward outweighs the environmental and political risks. This changes things, as it no longer seems like a vanilla version of a business expansion story, more like a high-stakes geopolitical bet on India becoming the AI capital of the global south. In, of course, the AI era, countries will no longer compete solely on human talent or cheap labor. Instead, they will grapple for raw compute power and the ability to process data at scale. Amazon just made a very, very powerful move. And I believe that is something which is very important. So what I need to ask you is this. Do you feel that Amazon's billion-dollar ambition is something which is a power story in every sense of the word, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of the infrastructure wars? So what do you think about Amazon's massive dominance in the Indian market? Please do let us know about your thoughts in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. This is a shocking discovery I made, and I have to share it with you. Here it is. The biggest AI bets in India's history might just be a paper tiger. Don't worry, I shall elaborate. Yesterday, the Uttar Pradesh government announced a massive 25,000 crore rupee play for the future. We are, of course, referring to AI parks and large-scale data centers, even a dedicated AI university. It sounds like the definitive leap for India's compute dominance. But, and there is a big but, within mere hours, the entire story turned on its head. The real story is that the internet started digging into the partner behind this massive deal. The government signed a memorandum of understanding with a firm called Puch AI. On paper, this is exactly what the country needs to compete with giants like OpenAI or Google, for that matter. We need the compute, and we need the infrastructure, and we need the scale. But here is something to think about before we start to celebrate. The digital community quickly pointed out that Puch AI is barely a year old. Reports suggest the company has a very small team and a limited public track record. Naturally, the questions started pouring in about how a firm at this stage manages 25,000 crores. What is the actual execution capability here? And that's a correct question. And of course, here's another one. And how exactly was the selection process handled for a project of this magnitude? But here's where it gets interesting, because the government had to step in with a major clarification. The answer to that is that this is a non-binding MOU. That means there is no immediate capital deployment and no guaranteed rollout. It is essentially a statement of intent rather than a confirmed construction plan. Now, of course, this is important because it highlights a much bigger problem in the Indian tech ecosystem. Can you see it? Well, if you can't, here it is. We are seeing a trend where headlines are being treated like final outcomes. MOUs are being announced with the fanfare of completed projects. But here is the reality check for everyone watching. Puch AI has pushed back against the claims, calling the online backlash misleading. They are defending their credibility and stating that the facts are being misinterpreted. But the tech community is still demanding transparency and strict due diligence, and rightly so. This matters because India is currently in a high-stakes race for sovereign AI. We aren't just talking about startup experimentation anymore. No, we are talking about nation-scale infrastructure that will power our future jobs and economy. So if we mistake hype for progress, we risk falling behind global competitors like DeepSeek or Microsoft. The real question is not just about whether one specific company is right or wrong. The real question is whether India is ready to separate the signal from the noise. Are we building real data centers or just generating viral headline cycles? This project could still become a massive reality, or it could fade away like many agreements before it have. But one thing is absolutely clear right now. And here it is, the front page take. And what is clear is this. The global AI race is no longer about who makes the loudest announcement. It is entirely about who can actually execute on the ground. The real question is, what happens when the cameras turn off? Please do let us know in the comments below. What do you think in terms of, should this be a putsch or not? This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. For 3 decades, Indian IT built its global dominance on one simple formula. Take complexity, scale talent, and deliver it cheaper and faster than anyone else. But with AI automating execution, clients demanding outcomes over effort, and new challenges from GCCs to private equity-backed firms rewriting the rules, the industry now faces its biggest test in a generation. Joining me today is Praveen Badada, the CEO and Managing Director at New Way Global. It's a high-end consulting firm, and he's going to help us understand whether this is a slowdown or a full-scale reset. Welcome to Front Page. Praveen, how are you doing?
Thank you so much, Sudhir. Thanks for having me. It's so good to be here and very excited for the conversation today.
Truly, I am as well, because apparently this is a conversation which has been going on for a while. A lot of us seem to be in a state of fogginess in terms of what exactly is going on. So you, as the expert, I'm sure would be able to help us cut the entire fog through. Let me start with the first question regarding the setting of the context.
Sure.
Fiscal year 25. $13.8 billion, and it took the IT industry figure to $282.6 billion. Correct? Sounds nice. But the fact is that with AI scaling the way it is, the old formula of ensuring that we have more people coming in, executing the jobs, etc. The point is this a reset, or are we seeing something completely different happen in front of our eyes?
Yeah, great question to start with. I think the way we look at this trend, right, this in many ways is not cyclical, right? This is fundamental, this is structural, and something that we have not really seen with the same intensity in the last, I would say, 40 years of the tech services existence, right? If you really map it over the last 4 decades or so, right, the initial phase of tech services were all about providing the cheapest labor possible.
Correct.
Executing on tasks that the customers wanted you to execute upon and deliver value in that sense, right? Sure. And then this model continued for 20 plus years, and then came SaaS and the advent of platforms, and the industry over a period of time and in many ways gradually shifted towards what we call as platform-led services, right? So you suddenly had companies who were specialists in a Microsoft platform or a Salesforce platform or a NetSuite platform. There were many, many platforms that were mushrooming, and services companies were trying to align to them to deliver a value back to the clients, right? What has happened in the last 5 years or so, and more so in the last 3 years, ever since the advent of ChatGPT, is this new model of services where customers are really coming and saying that, look, I want the distance between me and my outcomes to be shortened, and I definitely want lesser people to be able to take me to those outcomes, right? So suddenly...
Why is that though?
Because there's...
The reason I ask you is I'll share that, is primarily because if the outcome is getting delivered, why should the end customer really bother?
Great question. I think the The one thing that's changing with the advent of AI is this whole definition of outcomes, right? Historically, the relationship between customers and services were all about, I have a vision as a customer, I need my partner to execute on that vision, right? With AI, there's haziness, in your words, like there's fogginess in terms of what the North Star of the companies itself is, of the customers itself is, right? And a lot of customers and enterprises that we talk to, they're actually very clueless. They're clueless in terms of how should they define the future resilience? What would their organization look like in 5 years from now? And therefore, because they themselves don't have clarity on their vision, their ability to translate that to a services company and say, execute on this, is getting constrained, right? So they are looking for, in many ways, partners who can co-create their vision. And once the vision is locked, they can execute on that vision. And that's a very different DNA, right? So this is the third phase of its evolution where we call it services for outcomes, right? So we started with labor as service. We then transitioned to services delivered through platforms. And now customers are saying, look, I don't care about labor. I don't care about platforms. You have to deliver tangible business outcomes to me.
But what business outcomes?
And that business outcome itself is not very clear for them, right? So they need partners who can co-create that vision, identify the right outcomes, and execute to that.
But tell me this, Praveen. New Way Global obviously is doing a fabulous job in terms of being that crucial cog in the wheel, so to say, as far as that conduit is concerned. What about the IT giants? Because I want to bring this to your notice. I'm sure you're aware of it. Niti Aayog says technology services firms now need to move from that old model to something which they're calling human plus AI plus agents, etc. But the fact is that how is it that these people will be able to pivot? I'm sure you're referring to the mid-market aspect, right? But what about the giants?
Yeah, I think typical of any such disruptions that have happened historically also, right? I think the patterns have remained, consistent in many ways, right? I think at least our projection is that if you look at next 2 to 3 years, we will see almost like a barbell type of a structure, right? The top companies on one end, yes, they are struggling today. If you think of the Infosys of the world, the TCS of the world, the Accentures of the world, there's no question in their minds that this is a generational disruption, right? Like this is something very heavy and they have to deal with it. It's challenging, right? But we also believe that given their overall positioning in the ecosystem, given the access of customers that they have, and given the critical programs that they've been running for customers, they will eventually figure it out. And if you think of companies like Accenture, companies like Infosys, they've all made programmatic shifts towards that AI pivot, right? They've all started towards that, and compared to where they were last year.
I do understand what you were just saying, but I have to obviously ask you this. Why are the Indian IT companies, the big ones, so reticent about talking about AI and it being a disruptor? Whereas when we actually see that, conversely in the West, they seem to be fairly thumping their chest and saying that, yes, I mean, this is happening and that's why we are moving in that direction. Is that also something to do with the fact that those companies are product oriented and we are services oriented? So there is a bigger shockwave when we reveal something like AI disrupting jobs. Is that the case?
I think eventually there's a high degree of convergence that we are noticing, Sudhir, in terms of what value services companies deliver and what value software companies deliver. If you think of software, it used to be, back in the days, it used to be software as licenses, right? I buy SAP licenses and I get my job done, right? Then came the wave of SaaS, right? Where licenses were not the topic. It was all about what that SaaS product or software as a services can deliver to me as a customer. Now companies are moving towards a model where they're calling it software as worker. So basically, you need software which can execute tasks for you end to end. And if you now mirror that to the services proposition, that has always been the proposition of the services world, right? So there's increasing convergence in terms of the value that software companies articulate to their customers and how services companies articulate to their customers. Now, I do believe quite honestly that in the last 2 quarters, Indian companies have also started taking a bolder position in terms of their overall AI narrative.
Because let's be honest, Praveen, it is an open secret.
It is, and I think a lot of that stems from the fact that the customers in the last 2 years were not really ready, if you ask me honestly. Right?
Okay.
They were a little bit concerned about the art of the possible, the hallucinations, the guardrails, the auditability of AI, and
natural concerns.
And I think in the last 2-3 quarters, some of those concerns, I would go on to the extent of saying that a lot of AI adoption today has moved from being a probabilistic model of AI adoption to a more deterministic model of AI adoption, in the sense that there's a lot more predictability about what AI will deliver. And there's also equal amount of predictability in terms of where AI would potentially go wrong. And therefore, you define your interventions way ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Think of guardrails, think of policies, think of the governance.
Fair point.
And the auditability of what AI is really doing, how AI is really making decisions, and ultimately is AI delivering to the outcomes that I, as a vendor, promise to my customer. Right? So there's a lot more progress that has also happened. And I think a lot of this is also rooted in the fact that customers are being ruthless, right? They are being very tight about negotiations. Procurement teams have identified this as a key lever to go back to these partners and say, look, we're going to renew only at 80% of the initial price.
Right.
So in many ways, this is the repricing of the market, right? Remodeling, repricing, that's very prevalent. And if the customers are going to any which way ask for that kind of discount, in renewals, for example, then the only choice that services companies have is to ride along and make sure that their delivery model is aligned, their operating model is aligned, their technology prowess is aligned. I think the problem that we see, Sudhir, quite honestly, is that a lot of these mid-market companies, right, and to my earlier point, I'm pretty sure and confident that tier 1 companies will evolve stronger from this. They will figure it out. They have the might and the relationships to stay,
the capital
to stay strategic with the clients.
Correct.
I also see the mushrooming of net new services companies who are flipping the model. They are not pivoting. They're not basing their business on talent. They are being very, very aggressive in terms of charging for outcomes. Just yesterday, I was talking to a company which has a model of 20% fee upfront and 80% only when the outcomes are delivered. And the outcomes will come maybe after 2 years, but there's this degree of courage and resilience that these new breed of companies are bringing to the table.
Let me add to that. What does that do to the execution layer, which we have all grown accustomed to, as far as the IT pyramid is concerned?
Yes.
So the layer at the bottom, do you feel it is now vanishing, although painfully, but do you feel?
Yeah, I would say that this is definitely a challenging time for obviously the business model, the operating model, and for the talent model, right? Now, the jury is still out whether this talent pyramid will shift to a pyramid or rather a diamond or any other shape that might take. But I think the
diamonds are forever.
Diamonds are forever. I think the real question is not whether it will happen or not. The real question is the timing of it, the when aspect of it.
Right.
And, in many ways, if you look at some of the bigger companies, they're still, the reason they're efficiently able to deliver services because of that base of freshers that they had invested into and trained them on different platforms and technologies. And now they're able to put those, at least historically, they were able to put those people to purpose and deliver some value. Right? Today, I think the one school of thought there is that if you arm these people, like these freshers and, people who have just come out of colleges, etc., you arm them with the right tools and you enable them with the right training, they can actually unlock significant value.
Tell me about the eligibility aspect as far as, in this AI-driven search.
Yeah.
What about the eligibility aspect that you were just kind of alluding to a little while back? I want to understand, the AI relevance matter more vis-a-vis the sheer scale?
The two, in my view, don't have to be separated, right?
Okay.
The definition of scale historically was all about people scaling, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that seems to be now...
In the world of AI,
it
doesn't have to be scaling with people. It should more be about scaling with intelligence.
Exactly.
Right? I want to address the fundamental point around what happens to people, right? Like, because the narrative generally is saying, look, you'll need lesser people. Yeah, sure, you will need lesser number of people. But one thing that most people miss out upon is that with this wave of AI, there are a lot of new use cases that will come up, right? So while everyone talks about 30 to 35% compression in terms of the headcount requirement, we strongly believe that with AI, there's a possibility to increase the quality of what you do.
Fair.
And the quantity of what you do.
Fair.
Right?
Fair.
And as long as you are 25% above quality and 25% above in terms of more number of projects that you're doing, which were earlier not possible, the industry can be a net beneficiary of it. The industry can continue to scale, right? In terms of revenue, in terms of even the people that may be required to deploy it.
Also, apart from the industry, Praveen, I wanted to understand this. How is private equity feeling about this entire mid-tier aspect in terms of backing it up? What kind of a change are you seeing? Is it very palpable, or is it just kind of starting to find its feet on the ground?
Yeah, private equity is something that we track very closely at Neoway. That's, in fact, Neoway stands for New Way of Value Creation, and it's all deeply rooted into how private equities think about their asset portfolio and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, so the private equity, the way you think of their model, right? Their hold period for any company is about 5 to 6 years, right? They have to exit most of their assets in that period, right? So the execution in that sense is very time bound, right? If you have an asset today, at max, you'll get 5 years to turn the asset around, and then you have to sell the asset to someone else, either take it to public markets or give it to another private equity sponsor, and so on and so forth. This whole pressure of time boundedness, right? In our view, and based on the examples we're seeing on the ground, we are seeing a higher sense of urgency in private equity backed company to ride this wave. We are seeing a higher intensity of investment, right? To the extent, in some cases, we are seeing that private equity sponsors are willing to hold the company slightly longer, commit the investments right now, so that the value can be unlocked. The third aspect in private equity, which again, is very interesting in my view, is that a lot of PE portfolio companies that you see today, right? They're all founder-backed companies. Right? At least majority of them are run by founders, right? It's the founder's vision that's getting executed. And they are the people who are running the companies. And the good part about founder-run businesses is that founders bring the ability to think asymmetry, right? They take long-term bets. Even if those bets do not work out for 2 or 3 years, they stay invested with those bets, right?
And also, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, founders are usually nimble enough.
They are nimble enough as well, right? So their ability to mix and match, pivot, invest, redo things, right? Without really worrying about, hey, what my next quarter is going to look like, right? And you see the compounding effect of that in public market companies, right? Where I don't think the CEOs are, it's not really a characteristic problem, right? It's really the structural problem of public market companies, and many Indian companies are public listed, right? Their ability to transform while protecting the core is very hard.
It's far more lethargic, I think.
They structurally become lethargic, right? Because they're always constantly, and I used to be part of those setups, and we used to do our board meetings every time, and it used to be very, very interesting, right? The first 5 minutes, everyone talks about AI and what we are doing on AI, and the next question is, how's the quarter looking?
Where do you see the next value addition in terms of the chain? Where do you see that huge value addition? Big pool.
Yeah, I think
in Indian IT.
Yeah, Indian IT, in our belief, there are 2 or 3 big value pools that will emerge. I think Indian IT historically has been a little bit of a laggard, I would say, on domain-specific solutions and vertical solutions. And with AI, you'll obviously work on solutions that companies know work and companies have adopted historically, and they want to pedal a little bit more on that. But there'll be a plethora of new solutions that were unimaginable earlier. Like think of an SMB manufacturer, right? Historically, if an SMB manufacturer had to do surveillance on the shop floor or the plant floor, they will go the typical route of IoT sensors, cameras, 5 people, some knock center, some feeds coming and someone, analyzing those feeds, maybe some technology, but that was the setup, right? Now, today with AI, all of that is gone, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly all of that has become an addressable market for an IT services company, which historically wasn't the case, right? So you will see new pockets of those vertical solutions, new and existing pockets of vertical solutions, where I think, I would say Indian IT has work to do. It's a massive value pool, but Indian IT has work to do, right? The second big area, which I believe will create massive opportunity, is this whole modernization aspect, right? Be it in terms of platform modernization, be it in terms of data modernization. Companies are not ready. Enterprises are not ready, right? Yeah, every board today wants an AI story or claims an AI pivot, but under the hood, the readiness is not there.
Such an honest feedback you've given.
Right?
True.
Enterprises are going to take time. I mean, we have been sitting in conversations where customers had narrowed down on 50 AI use cases 2 years ago.
And they're still...
And today, the reality on the ground is they have only 2 of those use cases in production. And the reason is not the intent or the investment or just the readiness at the infrastructure level is not there. And they are expecting partners to come in and help on the modernization bit, right? So that, I believe, is the second one. And then the last one, I would say, is the whole auditability and the governance of AI, which will create a massive pool, right? So, IT services companies who are investing time, energy, effort in building governance capabilities, right? And taking it all the way to defining what outcomes really mean and tracing those outcomes through the agentic journey.
Talking about outcomes, I have to ask you this. Sure. Is the billable model over? Why? Because we are seeing layoffs. We are seeing all of those things happen. The customer is still asking for outcomes. So where does that leave that entire model now?
Yeah, so I think I get this question in most conversation. I think the fundamental thing is that people overestimate the potential in the short term, and underestimate in the long term. In the long term, billable hours as a concept,
which is gone, done and dusted,
it'll be gone, right? Like you will not see the industry.
What's the timeline that you're seeing for that?
It's anyone's guess. We are all crystal ball gazing, but I think if we look at the arc at which the technology is evolving, I would say another 3 years, this industry will look very different, right?
3 years?
3 years. This will look very different. But if you look at it today, right? Today, the billable hours are still very relevant, right? Because
of the old
customers' readiness, the old orders, and even the services readiness, right? So they're not proactively, in many cases, pushing for some of that. What it leaves the industry with is this thought of, everyone is today talking about reimagining with AI, right? Re-AI imagining, reimagining with AI. What I fundamentally believe needs to happen is refounding with AI, right? Like companies will have to define almost like a 2-speed engine. You have your BAU, slowly you're transitioning from your TNM and staff-oriented model to FP and outcome model, less human dependent. That will see its slow kind of death over a period of time.
It segues me into something which is perfect right now. It flows wonderfully well that you mentioned this 2-way engine. You talked about refounding yourself. Yeah. I need to obviously give you a slight stat. $380 billion is the valuation as far as Anthropic is concerned, right? As far as the total IT industry in India is concerned, that's somewhere about $280+ billion, right? Razorpay very recently partnered with Sarvam. What do you feel about companies, Indian IT companies going ahead and partnering with, for example, an OpenAI? Or why is it that an Anthropic these are of course 2 different questions, but why is it that these people are not partnering with let's say Indian IT?
They are partnering, right? I think most of the bigger platforms have realized the importance of, I wouldn't say just Indian IT, but overall IT services as a critical cog in the flywheel. I think, everyone has made announcements of partnerships with the Indian IT tier 1 firms and tier 2 firms. Back in the days, Quantify kind of companies partnered with NVIDIA, right?
Which is wonderful. What do you have to say about Anthropic?
Anthropic has partnered with, I believe, Infosys very recently, right? And to your earlier point, like the Devin example you were giving, ultimately, someone to use Claude, IT is a good channel. IT industry is a good channel to deploy Claude as a thing. I mean, the other interesting thing, connecting it back to the private equity world, is that the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI are actually creating very meaningful partnerships with the private equity ecosystem, right? So if you think of all the large PE firms, there's active conversation today about creating almost like a joint venture with OpenAI and Anthropic, with the ultimate intent of saying, look, all of the engineering that you do, all the people that you have in your portfolio companies, they should be AI-fied, they should be toolified with a Claude or with an OpenAI and so on and so forth. Right?
Brilliant, Praveen. But I want to ask you this. We keep talking about sovereignty.
Yep.
It's a very important aspect, needs to be a pillar as far as us moving forward is concerned.
Yep.
There was this conversation, I remember, and I will not quote, but with Mr. Mohandas Pai, he talked about the fact that there's no point in going ahead and competing with the big giants, etc. Let's go ahead and find a way or a corridor where we excel at certain things and are able to achieve far greater perspectives. Just a thought, but I'll come back to what I was trying to say. I was trying to say this. Why is it that the Indian IT or IT at large is not collaborating with, let's say, the Indian companies like a Sarvam or a Bharat Gen, etc.? They seem to be a lot more, how should I put it in a mild way?
I think this has got a lot to do with the economics of the industry today. I mean, Sarvam is a great platform. I think it's a great story emerging out of India. A lot of work to be done, by the way. Right? It's the same level of excitement that we had with ChatGPT in 2022. But GPT 5.3 is a lot more powerful than the first iterations of ChatGPT, right? So we have to, I think Sarvam and for that matter, any other platform, sovereign and non-sovereign, they will have to go through that journey. The good part is the time it will take for companies to evolve to the next level is shortened, right? Because the technology has been proven and you could do things much faster, much cheaper and all of that, right? So they will have to go through that journey. And as long as the economics work out, right? As long as the adoption of platform like Sarvam becomes global, which I hope it does, right? Because of the NVIDIA partnership and all the other things that are happening around it. I hope some of these platforms scale to a global footprint. And if enterprises start adopting or believing in these platforms, services companies will naturally align. See, ultimately, it's all about where you put your bucks and where you will get the biggest bang for that buck.
So it's essentially coming from the fact that, very simply put, as you just said it, that evolution still needs to probably take place for a Sarvam or a Bharat Gen.
Absolutely.
And they seem to be a lot more confident in terms of, let's say, an Anthropic or for that matter, an OpenAI. Is that the reason?
Because of the proven aspect of those platforms, right? And the fact that they don't have to do the selling in enterprise setting for platforms like Claude, right? But today, Sarvam is great and they will evolve and I'm sure they will become the best at what they're doing, but it's that journey, right? Today, does the world know about Sarvam? Yeah, they've started knowing about it now.
It's chicken and the egg, no?
It's not maybe chicken and the egg, but I think it just...
Come on, Praveen, at the end of the day, you give somebody a shot and they've proven themselves in a big way.
I will say it in a different way. I will say that we will see a lot more collaboration happen between the upstarts in IT services and Sarvam. You will see a lot of new age companies, right? This whole refounded companies.
Because legacy companies are little
skeptical, this will give them, for these refounded companies, these kind of collaborations will give them a differentiated way of approaching the market. Right? This whole language aspect of it, the sovereign aspect of it. There's a new market that's getting opened up, which unfortunately, or for whatever reason of economic sense, the tier ones are still not very aggressively focused on, right? So there's a window of opportunity you will get with some of these boutique houses and niche companies who will partner with...
Which tends to actually happen across so many sectors, no? Is that we've seen that across, not just IT, we've seen that across so many different sectors.
It's a standard playbook where...
Tends to happen. Right?
Yes.
When this churn takes place, the big companies tend to be a little more shy and then suddenly a new corridor opens up.
Yeah, with the only difference being that shyness will erode very quickly, right? Because the time horizon has shrunk dramatically, right? So even if we go by what you are saying, in the sense that big companies are not partnering, can they survive?
No, I'm not saying, but that's a fact.
Yeah, let's just go with that. But I'm just saying that Will that continue to be that way over the next 12 months? Maybe not, right? They'll have no choice as these platforms evolve and scale. They will have no choice but to
Suddenly
find the right
find
ecosystem.
a method.
Okay.
This now brings me to the point, Praveen, and I have to obviously say that you've been wonderful as far as all of your insights are concerned. No, but truly. And I would like for you to tell me this, which is that as a young kid, 21-year-old kid, who's probably watching this interview, so if you are, hello. I would like for you to tell that person who's about to start off his journey and has got wonderful dreams in his eyes or her eyes, what do you want to tell them?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot going on, and I'm of course not putting any pressure on your shoulders, but what would you like to give them as a guideline moving forward?
Yeah, I think quite honestly, this is a very exciting time in the tech world. And to my earlier point, right, this whole democratization of access, democratization of power, AI power is going to enable every one of them.
Okay.
Right? And the limitation will be about their own creativity, their own ideas of what they want to create and how do they want to create, right? In fact, I'll go to the extent of saying that will someone need to wait till 21 to be employed in the tech services ecosystem, right? All of us went through a very standard pattern of preschool, school, college, and then some professional jobs, right?
Right.
Will that pattern itself change? I have 2 kids at home, 9 and 6.
Wonderful.
Right? I see them using AI in small little ways every day in the house, right?
Right.
They're experimenting, they're writing stories, they are thinking creatively. You know, if they're stuck on something, like my son will come and ask me, hey, can you open Gemini? He doesn't know it, he doesn't pronounce it right. He's like, can you open Gemini?
I wish they actually also rename it. It sounds nicer.
Yeah, so you know,
Gemini.
so I think there'll be immense amount of power that will come to every single one of them who wants to use it. And I would also say that the pedigree beyond a point will not even matter, right? Doesn't matter you are from IIT or a tier 2, tier 3 college, right? It's at the end of the day, with some rewiring and some reskilling and some adaptability, both of them will have an equal chance at opportunities in the world.
Yeah, I think one won't replace the other. To be honest, I don't think that will ever happen. All right. So, fair point. I just want to ask you this. We are going to put you through a rapid fire, Praveen. Sure. So, if you're ready, and very, very quickly, let me just give you the rules of the game. Mm-hmm. Your answers need to be extremely short.
Okay.
Because hence the rapid fire. All right. Sure. So, if you're all set.
Away. Yeah.
So, if you're a CEO of a large IT firm today, what is the first thing that you will change?
The first thing I'll change is the operating model, right? Okay. What worked in the past will not work in the future, and that's the operating thesis, and everyone has to rally around it.
Okay, fair enough. Which part of the IT pyramid disappears? We've discussed this. First, in the next 3 to 5 years.
I think managers and managers of managers, I think all the inefficiency that got crept in over the years will go away the first. And then people who don't adapt will ultimately
be the next phase. Yes. So the fat will get trimmed, essentially.
Most likely, yes.
Will Indian IT hire more people in the future or lesser?
I would encourage the industry to not think in headcount terms, but more in value terms. So truly live up to this, you know.
And that's where NeoWay Global comes in.
That's where NeoWay Global comes in. Yes.
So who's in a better position? The 2 billion mid-tier firm methodology or the 20 billion giants?
I think the 20 billion giants are going to be okay. I don't think we'll see any other organic $10 billion company or even $5 billion company getting created. I'm being very bold about it here. I don't think anyone will scale to 5 billion organically. Mm-hmm. The industry will go through a massive phase of consolidation. I would imagine a lot of new breed of companies, AI first and AI native companies, to come up.
These
which will ultimately
methods that you were talking about.
Yeah, which will ultimately put pressure on the middle. I think the top is going to be okay. It's the barbell. Top is going to be okay. Bottom will have a lot of opportunity. It's the middle, right? If they don't change, they can't scale.
Fair enough. Do we need a founder thinking back in Indian IT vis-a-vis a CEO?
I would say the founder thinking has to come back.
Be more nimble,
Asymmetry, nimbleness, taking bold bets, I think is the need of the hour. If the industry has to survive, that's the new way of thinking.
Okay. Final question. Do you believe that somebody like Mr. Narayan Murthy, a kind of founder like that, will make a comeback in this kind of an environment, or for that matter, that kind of thinking?
I think most of these guys in many ways are already involved in reshaping and redefining. So
70-hour works.
Let's not comment on that, but generally
I'm just
they are generally involved in terms of reshaping, and it's good to get that kind of mentorship from people who've seen all the journeys, who've seen the transformations, and I think it's good to have some of them around, and as the industry evolves, get guidance from them. I think the data also suggests that people who have had founders still in some capacity as chairman or as mentors along with professional CEOs, they've done reasonably better compared to companies who've been only professional CEO led at a wider spectrum. So I think it's always good to get that kind of support and mentorship from people like Mr. Murthy, and this will eventually hopefully help the industry evolve to its next iteration.
Finally, I have to obviously ask you this, given the fact that Trump is in his own bubble all the time, and the way he behaves is only Trump knows. But given the fact that whatever is going on in terms of, it's so unfortunate, what kind of an impact do you see it having if it extends, if it carries on, the trauma carries on for some more time? How is it going to have an effect on Indian IT?
Yeah, I think I've written a lot about this. I think my general belief is that the Indian IT industry has been very, very resilient. Be it sunshine or sunset, they have always survived, they've always thrived. They've always figured it out, right? If you think of recession, if you think of the digital crisis, COVID crisis, even AI, right? I think, and even the geopolitics, the way it is shaping up, I think my strong belief is that resilience is at the core of the Indian IT services industry, and they will survive. Look, war is happening, and we're all talking about war today, but in many forms and shapes, there are a lot of disruptions that happen every day in the companies, right? There's all kinds of disruption, right? And even then, as a combination of puts and takes, you survive and you thrive, right? And I think I see this as no different. Yes, obviously there's stress. It's unfortunate. Hopefully it ends.
More exacerbated.
It is, and I think it's because in the age of social media and digital, I think some of this is becoming a lot more than what it really is. So there'll be temporary shock. I would not deny it.
Would you have any numbers maybe at the top of your head as far as how this might impact, let's say, deals moving forward? The numbers as far as deals which will get cracked or they put on the back burner?
The fundamental thing you have to understand is Indian IT is a lot more leveraged and anchored on US and European markets, less so on the Middle East and Indian market at an aggregate level. So unless this prolongs, unless this goes on for a fairly long period of time and it puts immense pressure on
really hope and pray it doesn't.
I really hope it doesn't, and therefore I think overall we should be okay. I don't see, at least in this quarter, I don't think we'll have any immediate challenges in terms of the overall performance of the industry attributable to the whole geopolitics part of it. Yes, there are other stress in the industry, AI,
which is fair.
All of that. We'll see how it evolves. I think the commentary is looking reasonably positive. The results will start coming out in the next few days. I do believe this quarter is going to be a very good quarter overall for the industry, and let's see where it goes from that point.
Fair enough. Praveen, it has been a true pleasure having you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And honestly, great insights. Let's just hope that you, being the Pandit that you are, a lot of those realities start to come to fruition. And we'll of course be having you back again and again as things progress, as far as a lot of those aspects are going to come to life. All right, Praveen, thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the CEO and Managing Director of New Way Global, giving some very interesting insights, some roadmaps, some things which of course we are all looking forward to, some things where we need to adapt and pivot. And I believe that is the message that Praveen is hammering on again and again. It is about changing the model itself. And here is the front page take based on the conversation that I've had with Praveen. Indian IT is no longer being challenged just by cost or competition, but by intelligence itself. The old model of scaling people is under pressure. And the next winners may be the firms that can scale AI, own outcomes, and rebuild the business from the ground up. Please do let us know what you have to say as far as this conversation is concerned in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. OpenAI is no longer just selling AI tools. Shocking? Not really. It now actually appears to be redrawing the commercial map using private equity money, joint ventures and targeted acquisition to lock in enterprise customers faster, deepen its lead over Anthropic and reduce its dependence on Microsoft at the same time. But that bigger push is also opening up new tensions with rivals, with investors, and possibly with its closest partner. Joining me today is Supreet Kondinya, a brilliant tech journalist who will be telling us what does this really mean and what is the way forward, and is it really just a bubble? Is it not? Is it properly thought out as a strategy? Lots to unfold. Welcome to Front Page, Supreet. How are you doing?
Thanks, Sudhi. Happy to be here as always.
Fabulous. Supreet, let's get right into it. I want to
Sure.
first understand what exactly is OpenAI trying to achieve with this entire new private equity pitch?
In one word, distribution.
Okay.
Because simply put, your private equity company, it's basically instead of selling to one company, selling your tools to one company, one after the other, you take a private equity firm that has like what 150 companies in its
Sure.
portfolio. You sell your products
To
them,
those
to
150.
those 100 companies through that private equity. What OpenAI is doing now is it's going to form a joint venture and it's going to sell their products. And because they're going to make money from selling these products to all of the private equity company.
How many
portfolio
joint
companies.
ventures are they looking at, Supreet? Any idea?
No, nothing as of now. I
Acha.
think the idea has just been floating around through media reports as of yet. So, and then based on the money that's being earned, they get a preferential treatment, and they're going to get like what 17.5% guaranteed returns. And
I want to be part of that private equity firm.
exactly, but do you have a private equity firm? So that's Anthropic is also targeting something similar, but now OpenAI has just leveled up and said, you know what, we're going to partner with private equity companies, form joint ventures, and we're going to give you a guaranteed return. So essentially, it's distribution. All of these private equity portfolio companies are going to be enterprise companies. So you're going to sell your enterprise products, make more money.
They raise the bills, the
Exactly.
100-odd companies raise the bills, the
Exactly.
private equity
They're gonna give it to
is
OpenAI.
enjoying itself, dipping
Yeah.
its toe in that 17.5% pool. And it all sounds nice and rosy. But I want to first, of course, ask you this, 17.5% with the kind of revenue that OpenAI is actually trying to generate or generating right now, you think that's a possibility? Last year, the losses were $8 billion.
Exactly. I think this is the shift that OpenAI wants to do. I think now they've realized now what over the last 3-4 years that enterprise AI and enterprise customers are the way to go. You're not going to make as much money with consumer applications. So this is an attempt to sort of increase your cash flow. You're going to get more and more revenue from like a bulk of companies now. And they're basically supercharging their distribution for enterprise companies. And the hope is that they make cash flow so that they give 17.5%.
Hope is an operative word
It all
there.
sort of rests on hope now. I think this has been the aggressive, the nature of moves that OpenAI has taken over the last whatever week or so. It's not been a dull day, especially in terms of enterprise AI distribution.
Behind the curtains, tell me this, sorry, behind the
Yep,
scenes, I'm cutting your train of
No,
thought,
that's
but
okay.
this is important. I wanted to understand, is it also because there is a certain amount of pressure now which is actually starting to be generated by the investors? Do you feel that is also somewhere this is making them kind of act in these ways to strategize? Because I remember, Supreet, a while back, you and I were discussing about this. Now they're going into health, they're going into
Yep.
teaching to generate more revenue, right? So is this one of those or no?
Seems to be. I think one picture that sums it all, which I'm sure our video team is going to put on the screen for our viewers to watch, is the competition between Anthropic, right?
That's a big one.
Look, Google is Google. If you look at three players, like let's say Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI, Google is Google. They're going to offset any of their losses because they have like what 100 and 150 revenue streams. But the real competition for OpenAI is Anthropic, right? And even though OpenAI started as a company well before Anthropic, today, if you can see the graph, 70% of new companies write their first enterprise AI check to Anthropic.
Fabulous.
And if you're an investor putting in billions of dollars to OpenAI, you wouldn't want to see that stat, right? You want OpenAI to be up top. You don't want OpenAI's enterprise AI
Supreet,
adoption.
I'm pretty sure the investors would already be doing their due diligence before they're investing into OpenAI. They would be seeing that stat.
Exactly. So I think they have promised, OpenAI has promised investors a more mature path towards enterprise AI adoption. You've got the Frontier platform now, which is a big part of the new funding raise, the 110 billion, which now AWS is also a part of, Amazon is also a part of. Frontier is now going to serve as a platform for enterprise AI companies to come on and use OpenAI's tools and services. And now a majority of that is going to be operated via AWS layer. I think that's another problem that has put a legal dispute, which we're going to talk much later in this segment. Correct. So there's a huge attempt to supercharge the enterprise AI efforts and to flip the graph to compete with Anthropic, which seems to have taken a huge lead.
Is that also why they've gone ahead and acquired Astral?
Exactly. That's one of the aggressive moves that I sort of bring up. Astral or whatever, something that they've acquired.
It's a proper noun.
Yeah. So it's something that you look at the lead that Claude Code has taken over Codex. While the numbers aren't out, today Codex only has 40% of the numbers that Claude Code has, and they want to supercharge OpenAI's Codex. So basically,
share the numbers. Supreet, if I remember one number, 2 million weekly users is on.
And I think that's what Codex says.
Codex,
Claude Code, Claude Code. Even though we don't have an official number, obviously it's going to be magnitudes of higher order. But if you look at, let's say, Astral sort of going on a lower level, what it does, it basically checks for your code quality. One of their products called Rough, and the other product UV sort of installs packages, manages dependencies and all of that. And here's the thing, the entire Astral's infrastructure and the tools are built over Rust, right? The programming language Rust. And the Codex CLI is also a Rust application. Now here's the thing, most acquisitions that we talk about is obviously product is one thing, but it's also the talent, right? UV and all of the other tools that people at Astral have built is built by really talented Rust engineers, which also will now be a part of OpenAI, helping them improve Codex. And according to some stats, UV was downloaded more than 126 million times since just the last months. So you see the sheer scale of maturity that UV has among the developer community and the ecosystem. And again, once again, to reiterate, they're getting a really talented pool of engineers to scale OpenAI's Codex now and hopefully reach the...
they're hiring in a big way as well.
Exactly. And with all of these attempts, and they just...
Also, another thing I'd like to just jog your memory on, Supreet. You and I were discussing this a couple of days back. There were a lot of these projects which they've kind of, put on the back burner.
Exactly.
They're now only concentrating on coding, and they believe that is the mainstay. Hence the launches of Mini and Nano, right?
Exactly. I think Mini and Nano were released for coding with much lower API pricing and much more quicker throughput speeds. And it goes back, Sudhi. I think that has been their strategies, even with acquisition. Astral is one thing that I've told you. It's just a very sweet set of developer tools that OpenAI has made a right decision. OpenClaw as well. It's
for sure.
all in the news. The founder, I know it's an over-exaggeration. There are many people calling him the Steve Jobs of this generation.
No, but
you've got Jensen Huang saying that every company needs an OpenClaw strategy. And now the guy who did OpenClaw as a side project is now a part of OpenAI. It speaks volumes about the kind of automation workflows that they want to build internally. StatSig is another A/B testing platform they acquired. PromptForce for security. All of these acquisitions are circling around their enterprise AI and coding, the entire Codex landscape. So yeah, it's been a very, very active, few months and weeks at OpenAI.
Tell me this. I have to ask you this. In terms of the strategy aspect, Supreet, do you feel OpenAI is on the right path? Point one. Point two, do you feel that they are truly a challenger to Anthropic, or are they still lagging behind?
Right. I think The important thing that you brought up earlier is that OpenAI is now stepping aside of side projects and focusing
Correct.
purely on code. That was precisely what Anthropic did. There were no side projects to begin with. It was just code, code, and code. And it was like master of one, right? Not the jack of all trades. Enterprises believed that, okay, you know what, Anthropic is out there only focusing on code, only focusing on codex,
built
Claude
that
code.
trust.
Exactly, and sort of built the trust.
Hence that 70% number.
Exactly. And there's a huge developer outreach. Everything that they did was circling around developers, and developers.
Sure,
Something that Steve Ballmer was saying in his Microsoft days. And OpenAI, when they started seeing Claude's revenue numbers and them, sort of evening out. And
I'm sure alarm bells would have been
exactly,
ringing.
and they're like, you know what, maybe we should have adopted this strategy. And
Good
better late
morning.
better late than never. I think they're aggressively pushing towards this strategy. Of course, consumer AI is going to be a big part. ChatGPT has 800 million users, but the thing is only a fraction of users pay. But if you look at developer
correct.
adoption, developers would love to pay, right? Anything for an enterprise or
Very
a
valid
startup
point.
to supercharge their workflows, right?
Sure.
It's very critical. If I pay to ChatGPT, there's no definitive signal that is going to improve my life and help me make more money.
Also, sorry.
Yeah,
but
that's
this
okay.
just popped up in my head.
Sure.
In the world of tech,
Right.
there is a very strong aspect of you being loyal towards a particular ecosystem
Exactly.
that you've been working with for a long time. Obviously, we understand that that ecosystem is constantly evolving and doing it at a breakneck speed.
Right.
That being said, do you feel a lot of people will be able to switch from Anthropic to OpenAI? Point one. Point two, the entire Department of Defense narrative, Supreet.
Yeah.
That's another aspect, which is a big one, optics-wise.
Exactly.
So how are they going to be able to deal with those things?
Right now, Anthropic has probably not had a good name in the books of the US government.
Correct.
OpenAI has had, I think, the project Stargate, which was very closely begun with the US government. Of course, they're in the good books of it. I think that plays a huge part in, because state support and is directly tied
What about
towards
the people? Yeah?
Exactly.
That's where I'm coming from. There was a lot of backlash, right, from the
Exactly.
people generally.
Exactly.
For OpenAI.
Exactly. There has been backlash, but if you look at purely the low level of the developer ecosystem, as I mentioned, what they mostly care about is this going to help my startup make more
Fair.
money? So I think that optics is one thing, but obviously it's good that effects are going to flow downstream if now Anthropic is being put as a security, whatever risk, as a capital risk or whatever. I keep forgetting the term.
Security risk.
Yeah, if they don't keep getting more and more funding and equity, which Anthropic is not aggressively raising as much funds as OpenAI, and obviously those impact will obviously flow downstream to the developers. But one, with OpenAI, all hope isn't lost in terms of migration. There are a good chunk of people who believe that Codex is a very good tool for them.
Fair.
And again, these acquisitions are very new. We're yet to see how they're going to materialize.
Fair.
And obviously, all hope is not lost. I think someone said, if you have Sam Altman at the helm, I think that man is someone who's got a very dangerous
knows how to lead in a big way,
mindset.
yeah.
He's more of a leader than this
Sure,
tech
sure.
nerd of sorts. So Sam Altman factor is huge. He's
But then there is a
scaled.
spanner in the works.
Exactly.
Let me please draw your attention to the Microsoft discussion, the elephant in the room.
That's the thing,
legal thing which is on the table now. Supreet, how do they deal with that?
Yep, there have been reports that sure, you have all of these enterprise AI efforts at one end. You're getting more and more capital, more and more cloud platforms, but Microsoft is obviously unhappy. To keep things short, Microsoft is now weighing in on a legal action because now with onboarding AWS as a partner, what does it mean for Microsoft's Azure, right? Initially, if you were to go back, Microsoft said OpenAI is going to exist exclusively on Microsoft's cloud infrastructure. But Microsoft could not provide the required compute for OpenAI. The more and more demands started coming up. So Microsoft sort of loosened the agreement and said, feel free to go with other cloud providers, but ensure your API requests, the developer requests, your enterprise requests flow through my cloud, which is Azure. Now what has happened with Frontier, the exclusive platform for enterprise AI and enterprise tools and services, this is being routed through AWS. Now, Microsoft is probably questioning, it's not official yet, how is this fair, right?
No, but there was
am
a
I
lot
honoring,
of
am I,
unhappiness within Microsoft.
exactly,
about this.
is OpenAI honoring the agreement? The
Yeah.
official, or whatever statement that it has made to a media outlet is that they're pretty confident that OpenAI is going to honor the official agreement. But
Fair.
again, it's considering a legal action. sort of a donkey of sorts, I
No,
think.
that's fair.
And also, a latest report that's come out just in the morning is that OpenAI, in one of the documents seen by another media outlet while they're planning to file their IPO, they say that the agreement with Microsoft could pose as a threat to their finances and numbers, because what has happened is now Microsoft's being in a legal action.
Correct.
The relationship has been broken down on numerous occasions, right? And when you have such a big company being disappointed in OpenAI, for an average investor, right? Microsoft is unhappy with OpenAI. Why would you buy the stock? It's one of the most valuable companies
Agreed.
on the planet. So they see that as a threat. It's just a lot that's going on
It's
with
just
OpenAI.
like a potpourri of
Yeah,
a
they're
lot of
trying
things. which are
everything,
going on.
right? You saw the deal with AMD, right?
Yeah.
Now they're buying a huge stock of AMD provided the GPUs are deployed and they get some results. Basically, OpenAI is just trying everything to pour in more and more capital.
I'll have to, unfortunately, because of the paucity of time, but very
Yeah,
quickly,
it's-
I know you and I
There's
can
a lot going
go on till the cows come back home. But I have to ask you very quickly, this is my thought,
Yep.
which is great timing for OpenAI in terms of trying to use the entire narrative in its favor, seeing the numbers, wanting to compete with Anthropic. What are the things to look out for? Two things you feel everyone watching needs to look out for in terms of how this story develops.
Cash flow, you got to keep in mind, read the reports, read what the analysts say about what OpenAI makes in revenue next year if their losses reduce. Losses are projected to increase year on year, right? If the losses even slightly reduce for OpenAI, which I'm not sure is
A
an
possibility or
exaggerated
not.
or a possibility, but that could be a huge signal to watch out for. And this entire private equity push, if that materializes, how is OpenAI's enterprise usage going to scale? What is Anthropic going to respond with? If Anthropic is going to raise more and more funds,
Valid
and what
point.
there's a lot to look out for. I think end of the day, you got to look at one number: how much is OpenAI's cash flow going to be? One good way of seeing it is how much money Microsoft will lose in its investment in OpenAI.
Well said.
That is something that they're obligated to state in their SEC filings, because Microsoft roughly owns around 27% of OpenAI. That could be a really good number to extrapolate and see how much money OpenAI is losing.
Fair enough.
Right? Keep an eye on the SEC filings and see how much money Microsoft will lose at OpenAI. Again, that might be a very arbitrary signal, but that's something that is going to
Makes
come
sense.
up on my mind.
What
Yeah.
you're saying, fabulous. As always, Supreet has hit the nail on the head. That's the metric which you need to look out for. Although, yes, this seems to be a conundrum for OpenAI. We are only wondering at front page, how are they going to climb out of this one? They seem to be heading in the right direction. And we believe that with Sam Altman at the helm, usually they have a way of leading into a situation where people generally tend to smile. Please do let us know what are your thoughts in the comments below as far as these developments are concerned. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM.